As has been true almost since the day President Trump was inaugurated, every week is an extremely fast and event and consequence-filled news cycle. There's barely any such thing as a slow news cycle anymore, and that's particularly been true over the past couple of weeks, ever since what has become the truly earth-shattering and transformative event of Charlie Kirk's assassination. We still don't know as much as we hopefully will and should about the shooter and the motive, so we certainly know some, at least in terms of the person being accused of having carried out that assassination. But the implications are multifold, and so much happened just in the last week alone in terms of the Trump administration's reaction, in terms of the transformation of the political discourse, in terms of all sorts of media events and consolidation of power, some of which Lee Fang very adeptly covered, some of which he just didn't have time to because of how many there were. So we hope to be able to get to as many of them both tonight and over the next week as possible. I think this really is one of those moments that is transforming American political history in ways that will endure, certainly for years, if not decades, and longer. We want to try and provide as comprehensive coverage as we can. Now, along those lines, one of the main controversies today, as part of the fallout of that memorial service that took place in Arizona, that for a lot of people, including ones who didn't even like Charlie Kirk or perhaps even strongly disagreed with him, definitely had parts of it that were emotional and uplifting and inspiring. I think many people found at least parts of Erica Kirk's speech to be remarkably brave and inspiring, showing a lot of internal strength, including what I think was the indescribably difficult choice on her part, following what she believes are the mandates of her faith, to express forgiveness for the person who took her husband's life. It's hard to imagine how difficult that is, but one of the speeches that I think is gaining the most attention, perhaps the most attention, was the one that was given by Tucker Carlson. And I think there's a couple of things to note, and I should say here that we were hoping to have Tucker on our show this evening to talk about this. The logistics made that impossible. We're working very hard to secure that for tomorrow night, so hopefully he'll be here himself so he can speak for himself. But I do want to go over some of what he said and what is being done in response to those comments. So first of all, let me show you the comments that Tucker made. And I should note here that unlike a lot of people, it's really amazing. As soon as Charlie Kirk was killed, I mean, huge numbers of Republican politicians and people in media came forward to pronounce Charlie was their closest friend, was such a close friend. And he was a person who was very gregarious, very outgoing. He was always very friendly to me, very generous in his work. But I think there were a lot of politicians trying to latch on to Charlie Kirk and claim a degree of friendship with him that they did not, in fact, possess. Almost mathematically, it would be impossible for that to be otherwise. But there were people in media, including friends of mine in the conservative movement, who were genuinely very close friends with him. And so a lot of them are very emotionally affected by not having a close friend die, but watching him be murdered in about as brutal of a way as possible. And one of those people, among many, is Tucker Carlson, who befriended Charlie Kirk very early on in his emergence into conservative media. I've heard Tucker talk publicly, but also privately to me about Charlie, and he had always expressed nothing but unadorned and gushing admiration for Charlie Kirk. And that is something that I think a lot of people, especially on the right, shared almost in a unique way. There's probably no figure who could have been assassinated who was more unifying among all the different, varying, often warring factions among the right than Charlie Kirk. But I know Tucker felt this very personally and has been affected by it a great deal and has spent 2 weeks pretty much every day talking about it, going on Charlie Kirk's show, which they are continuing and often having friends of his come on. And Tucker's message pretty much for the last 2 weeks from the time that Charlie Kirk died has been very consistent, which is that he believes that Charlie Kirk, above all else, was defined not as a Republican or a conservative or a podcaster or an activist or a supporter of Donald Trump, but instead the overarching attribute of Charlie Kirk's life, and he himself has said this many times, as is his wife, is his Christianity, his faith in Jesus. He always centered that in everything that he did. It doesn't mean you have to like it or not. I'm just saying that that clearly was the animating, defining force for Charlie Kirk. And Tucker is somebody, I think, especially later in life, for whom that has become equally true. Tucker speaks with much greater religiosity than he previously did. I certainly think it's something as central to his life as it had been for Charlie's. And he went to the memorial service with the intention not to make political points, not to make partisan points, the way a couple of the speakers have done, the way certainly a lot of people have done in Charlie's name since he's killed, but instead to talk about Charlie's life and the values that he represented and Tucker's relationship to them, beginning with his Christianity. And that is what Tucker believes, above all else, is what caused the death of, or the murder of, Charlie Kirk. Not that he was a conservative, there's lots of conservatives, not that he was conservative on social issues, but that he primarily was evangelizing both his religion and his politics through this prism of Christianity. And Tucker has talked often about how much violence that has provoked in history, how many people have been martyred professing their faith in Jesus Christ or evangelizing for Jesus. And so this is a very consistent theme that Tucker didn't just invent over the last couple of weeks or for yesterday. And he tried to make the center of his speech a focus on this. And the one thing I will add before I show you the clip is that Tucker is one of those people, and you can watch him in any context and you'll see this, who does not prepare his speeches in advance. Doesn't matter how important the occasion is. At the Republican National Committee convention, for example, and this is true of the Democratic National Convention as well, they are extremely rigorous about the kind of messaging they permit or don't permit to be aired, because there's a lot invested in how the party is defined in the electorate right before the election, which often takes place at the convention, and they require every speaker to submit in advance an exact script of what they're going to say. But Tucker, being Tucker, had the ability to refuse. He spoke off the cuff at the RNC. I'm not saying he doesn't think before a little bit about what his themes are, but he doesn't script it at all. He doesn't write it down. And I share this as well. I don't ever like to speak from a script. I like to speak spontaneously, to kind of have a general idea of what I might say, but really feel the energy of the crowd, connect to the crowd, and have things be organic in the way that you're communicating, which a script often impedes. And Tucker very much feels like he can be his truest and most effective self if he's speaking spontaneously. Now, one of the risks of doing that is that you can express yourself imperfectly as compared to, say, if you labor over every word and you're very police and controlled about everything you're going to say. But Tucker's a very skilled communicator. I think his enemies will acknowledge that. He has a lot of confidence and trust in his ability to speak without notes, and I think there's good reason for that. And I just say that as the context. This was not some scripted speech. He wasn't reading from a teleprompter. The phraseology wasn't constructed in advance. It was very much spontaneously delivered. And here is part of what Tucker said, the part that has caused so much coordinated, high level, in terms of the Israeli government and U.S. government and their loyalists, very coordinated, very intense reaction, and seizing on this passage to try and depict Tucker as an anti-Semite, as a Nazi, as someone who doesn't belong in decent company. This is what he said.
Ultimately, he was a Christian evangelist. And it actually reminds me of my favorite story ever. So it's about 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem, and Jesus shows up and he starts talking about the people in power, and he starts doing the worst thing that you can do, which is telling the truth about people, and they hate it, and they just go bonkers. They hate it, and they become obsessed with making him stop. This guy's got to stop talking. We've got to shut this guy up. And I can just sort of picture the scene in a lamplit room with a bunch of guys sitting around eating hummus, thinking about, what do we do about this guy telling the truth about us? We must make him stop talking. And there's always one guy with the bright idea, and I can just hear him say, I've got an idea, why don't we just kill him? That'll shut him up. That'll fix the problem. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Everything is inverted.
Now, I watched this live. I was on an airplane traveling for 24 hours. As I said, I was in Malaysia. I was traveling back home. And I didn't think anything of that passage. It was very consistent with what I anticipated Tucker would say, with what he has been saying, and I understood it to be the following. A pretty simple point. It's basic Christian theology, basic biblical history. You read the Bible, and there's no doubt that Jesus' death was preceded by a lot of guardians of mainstream Jewish thought who viewed Jesus rightly as a subversive, as a revolutionary, as somebody who was preaching a gospel and a religion that was directly at odds with the religion that prevailed at the time. That was the religion of the dominant Jewish leaders. I mean, obviously, that's what Jesus was, is he overthrew the prior order and the prior thinking and created a new gospel as, in the views of Christians, the Son of God. And he was creating a lot of agitation. He was Jewish himself. His disciples were Jewish. And the Jewish leaders at the time viewed him the way they view many revolutionaries, including Christian evangelists, as very threatening to their prerogatives, as very heretical. And as Tucker said, they decided the only way they could really deal with him, because he was becoming so effective, so many people were following him and being converted and moving away from their control, that they decided their only solution was to kill him, in the hopes that it would put an end to his teachings and to this new religion. And these specific Jewish leaders, not the Jews, but the Jews at the time, went to the Romans, to Pontius Pilate, and said, this is becoming a problem with us. We would like to execute him. They couldn't have done it without the Romans' approval. They got the Romans' approval, and then they crucified him. And that's how Jesus died on the cross. This is, I mean, so basic. I mean, I didn't even grow up in a Christian upbringing, and I learned that by the time I was, I don't know, 10. I mean, I'd never heard of any other version of that. Now, of course, I understand that this can be a sensitive topic for Jews, because this did get distorted into a claim throughout the next centuries, many centuries, that it wasn't just those Jewish leaders who conspired to kill Christ and who organized and arranged for his death, but Jewish people as a whole. And there were references to the blood, his blood shall be on us and our future generations, and it was used to persecute Jews horrifically throughout the Middle Ages, and that became the blood libel. And so, of course, there is this sensitivity, given history, about saying, oh, the Jews killed Jesus, but Tucker didn't even mention the Jews. That wasn't the point of his story. He wasn't there to say the Jews killed Jesus. He wasn't even remotely talking about Israel or the Jews. He was there at a memorial service to memorialize his friend and to talk about the Christian connection. He was trying to say that Christians throughout time have been martyred for their faith, beginning with Jesus. And he was essentially trying to say that Charlie Kirk was similarly martyred, the way he's been saying for weeks, because his predominant characteristic, even though he was a conservative and pro-life and opposed to a lot of the agenda of the trans movement and DEI, it was all presented as, I'm a Christian man with a Christian faith, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a Christian man. And he talked about that being his priority scheme. And Tucker was simply trying to say that he believes that the primary cause of Charlie's assassination was his Christianity, just like that's what led to Jesus' death. That was it. I found it so benign. And I did find this reference to hummus strange. I don't know. I didn't know. I didn't know, was hummus really a common food at the time in that epic, in that era? Was it something that Jews were associated with? I think in common American parlance, hummus is very much a food associated with the Arab world. If you go to the Middle East, you eat hummus all the time. I actually had a lot of hummus in Malaysia, even though it's not part of the Arab world. And I think Tucker was just trying to create an image of what these people were doing, how these kind of establishment people were behaving as they sat over these lamps. And it was just the image that popped into his mind because he was talking about the Middle East and he just picked hummus. And for some reason, all of this got interpreted as Tucker blaming the Jews for for Jesus' death. His reference to hummus was some sort of dog whistle about Jews, even though I don't know anybody who has ever associated hummus with Jews before. If anything, it was just kind of a off-the-cuff reference where he couldn't think of something else more expressive about what he was describing, so he just grabbed hummus because he associates that with the Middle East, which he visits a lot and eats hummus there. And then went on to say that the main point, which is that when you try and murder somebody and assassinate them as a means of shutting them up, as a means of destroying their message, obviously he cackled because he said the people who thought they were doing that, when it came to Jesus, spectacularly misfired. They couldn't have miscalculated worse. It was the killing of Jesus that spawned Christianity as the major religion, as a massive religion that ended up gaining billions of followers over the next 2,000 years to this very day. And he was laughing at the mismatch between them thinking they could kill him and silence him versus the reality. And he was making the analogy to Charlie Kirk, saying, look, people thought they could probably silence Charlie Kirk, and that we're in a stadium full of 65,000 people filled to the brim with huge numbers of people around the world being more inspired and emboldened by Charlie Kirk's message than ever before. And that's clearly the case. Charlie Kirk has become much bigger in death and in martyrdom and in assassination than he ever was in his life. And that was really the only point I think Tucker was making. And yet, all throughout the day, I don't mean at all from people on social media who are just randoms or people who are just of insignificant influence. I mean, there was clearly a coordinated campaign on the part of the Israeli government, Israeli officials, opinion makers in the United States who have long tried to destroy Tucker, not because they're upset about funeral protocol. It was a very politicized memorial service, as it should be. Charlie Kirk was a political person. But it wasn't that they were angry about his breach of protocol at a funeral. They also are not upset about anti-Semitism. They're more than happy, the Israeli government and its loyalists in the West are, to embrace anti-Semites as long as they're supportive of Israel. There's a big strain of anti-Semitism in this dispensationalist evangelical movement, the most extreme version of it, that has become fanatically pro-Israel, even though they believe the Jews are damned because they reject Christ and they're going to hell for eternity. I mean, it's kind of an anti-Semitic theory at its core, in a way. I mean, you could make an argument why it's not, but it's certainly not an argument friendly to the Jews. But Israel doesn't care. They love John Hagee. They love those leaders who believe Jews are damned and going to hell because they support Israel. That's what they care about. You can be as anti-Semitic as you want, but as long as you support Israel, you're fine. And Tucker's sin is not anti-Semitism. It's not even close. He's not anti-Semitic. Nothing he said is remotely anti-Semitic. His sin is that he has one of the most influential platforms, especially among conservatives and young conservatives, where support for Israel for decades has been locked down completely. And he has become one of the several very influential people. And Charlie Kirk was starting to stick his feet in that pond to start questioning the U.S. relationship to Israel. Why are we funding Israel? Why are our leaders going there all the time? Why are we sending billions of dollars over there? Why are we sacrificing so much for this foreign country? And the ability to destroy Tucker is crucial to what has become this panic among Israeli leaders and among their loyalists in the U.S. that public opinion in favor of Israel is collapsing. It's unraveling. And there's all sorts of things, from takeover of social media, as we'll get to buying up media outlets, to censorship laws on campuses, to try and basically destroy any ability to continue to have people hear criticism of Israel. And destroying Tucker is vital to that. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has been trying to get Tucker off the air for a long time. Back in 2021, before Tucker was even talking about Israel, but was starting to espouse a foreign policy of America first and anti-interventionism that really makes them uncomfortable, they wrote a letter to Fox News, to the Murdoch family, condemning Tucker Carlson's impassioned defense of the, quote, race replacement theory, and demanding that he be fired. They demanded that the Murdoch family fire Tucker Carlson in 2021. They said he, quote, disgustingly gave an impassioned defense of the white supremacist great replacement theory, which was not true. Said this is, quote, not legitimate political discourse. And then they concluded, given his long record of race baiting, we believe it is time for Carlson to go. So they wanted, the ADL did, Tucker Carlson off the air in 2021 when he was at the 8 o'clock hour in Fox News and was the most popular cable host in the history of the medium. People saw Tucker Carlson as a threat to this agenda for a long time, even before he started talking overtly about Israel. And just like Benjamin Netanyahu saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk as a very valuable, opportunistic opening to go all over media and say, I know you're grieving Charlie Kirk. We are too. He was the greatest friend that Israel ever had, to try and redirect emotion from Charlie Kirk to make him seem like his primary cause was supporting Israel, even though he talked openly about the pressures he was under for not being as steadfast or obedient to Israel and the anger he felt over getting attacked by donors and others. They tried to rewrite history instantly. They're now seeing this opportunity as a way to finally destroy Tucker based on what you could argue at worst was some awkward or ill thought through phraseology. I don't even think it is that, but I'm being generous to his critics. But they unleashed a full-on campaign of reputation destruction, of course, based on the standard liberal tactic of just screaming racist everybody. Here are the Times of Israel. Tucker Carlson appears to blame Jews for killing Charlie Kirk with his story on Jesus' death. I mean, Tucker Carlson didn't even blame Jews for killing Jesus. He didn't mention Jews, let alone try and blame the Jews for killing Charlie Kirk. Tucker Carlson didn't even remotely suggest that, but this was the all-out opportunity to distort everything that he was saying. Here's the New York Post, which has typically refrained from attacking Tucker Carlson, though has long been in New York City a bastion of pro-Israel support. Their headline was Tucker Carlson accused of stoking an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about Charlie Kirk's murder at his memorial service. What conspiracy theory was that? Here is Tablet Magazine, which tends to be a kind of more moderate but very pro-Israel Jewish journal. They issued an editorial, which was like a decree, and this is their order to Americans, quote, cut Tucker loose. That was the headline, cut Tucker loose. The former Fox host escalating attacks on Jews, evangelicals, and Trump's foreign policy are fracturing the right. It's time for his friends in the administration to show him the door. What's actually fracturing right-wing discourse is the fact that huge numbers, particularly on conservatives, are finally waking up and saying, wait a minute, we were promised America first. We were promised no more wars. Why are we sending billions to Israel? That doesn't sound like America first. Why are we constantly getting involved in wars for Israel? Why are our leaders always in Israel instead of tending to their own constituents in the neighborhoods in the United States and the lives of Americans? Why are we being censored over Israel? Polling data shows support for Israel unraveling, and that's why they're so desperate to eject the most influential people in the discourse who are talking to young conservatives and getting them to think about an issue which for so long was closed off from debate. One of the ironies of all of this is that a lot of these Israel supporters were attacking Charlie Kirk less than a month ago in vicious ways because of what he was doing. He invited Dave Smith to have a debate about Israel at Talking Points. He invited, at Turning Point, he invited Tucker Carlson there, even though Tucker was already a hated figure among Israel loyalists. He just platformed them all and said, no, Israel needs to be debated. He assembled a group of young conservatives to talk about it. And they're all now trying to say, no, Charlie Kirk was ours. He was a steadfast Israel loyalist, including some of the people attacking him very recently. Here's a Mike Cernovich tweet who, we've criticized some of Mike's views before, but he's very insightful, I would say, and very independent. And one of the things he said about yesterday after watching the memorial service was this, quote, thunderous applause as Tucker Carlson is announced at the memorial service, standing in stark contrast to the astroturfed hate campaign being run against him in some circles, completely rejected by the people. And there is very much reserved at the elite level this hatred for Tucker, this attempt to depict him as a bigot and a hater of Jews. If you go anywhere, Tucker gets mobbed at every conservative event by people who love him. And he continues to be one of the most watched and respected names in conservative media. That's what's causing the panic. Laura Loomer, speaking of fanatics of Israel and loyalists to Israel, replied to Mike Cernovich's observation this way, quote, there were also a lot of people who didn't stand for Tucker. I am here on the floor at Charlie Kirk's memorial, and I certainly didn't stand for Tucker. And a lot of other people didn't stand as well. We can honor Charlie Kirk's legacy without following Tucker and his Qatari masters. We will stand for Charlie, not Tucker. That's the beauty of it all. We can have differences in opinion and not blindly follow self-appointed, quote, leaders of the GOP like Tucker Carlson. No, Tucker doesn't speak for all people. No, not everyone here stood for him. The truth will set us free and the truth will come out. Quote, hummus. We all see through you, Tucker. You just can't help yourself. Here's Elon Levy, who is a very kind of promoted young spokesperson for the Israeli government, an official spokesperson, who said this today, quote, complete with a laugh like a cartoon villain, Tucker Carlson uses Charlie Kirk's funeral to spread an anti-Semitic blood libel. These people are insane. This bears no relationship to anything he said, not yesterday or ever. Mark Levin, who I think is pretty much open at this point that Israel is his primary priority, tweeted a statement from someone named Sid Rosenberg, who said this, quote, "I have to get out all my negative thoughts and anger so I can head into the Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, with a clear and optimistic mind. So as we get set to sit down for Rosh Hashanah dinner momentarily, I just want to send a hearty, quote, fuck you to Tucker Carlson, Candace, and all the Jew haters masquerading as righteous people. Now I can enjoy my holiday." And Mark Levin above it wrote, "Well said." Melanie Phillips, who's a far-right Jewish fanatic of Israel in the UK, said this, quote, "From the oldest libel against the Jews to the latest iteration, rounded off with a demonic cackle, all brazenly in front of the President of the United States and thousands of mourners. This chilled the blood. The battle now underway for the Republican Party is a battle for the soul of America." By which she means that the battle of America is whether to get conservatives to worship, revere, and support Israel with all the loyalty and passion that she does. Matthew Schmidt, who is an editor of Compact Magazine, said this, quote, "Once again, Tucker Carlson finds a way to insinuate that Charlie Kirk's murder had something to do with the Jews. No, he didn't. No matter what happens, someone else will find a way to blame it on the Jews, the poor Jews, the Jews who have a country that is funded and armed and diplomatically supported and military supported by the greatest military power and the richest country on the planet, the United States, totally captive to it, but they're always the victim." Mark Dubowitz of the supremely neocon Foundation for Defending Democracies that has always wanted war with Russia, with Iran, regime change in Iran led by the United States as their primary goal for Israel, said Tucker Carlson used the memorial for Charlie Kirk, a passionate friend of Israel and the Jewish people, there's that propaganda they always insert, to spread anti-Semitic blood libels. I knew his father, Richard Carlson, vice chair at FDD, who strongly supported Jews in Israel. I can't fathom what happened to Tucker. Here's Laura Loomer. This is in July of 2025, 2 months ago. Everyone now pretends that Charlie Kirk was completely on their side, that they love Charlie Kirk, that he was the avatar of pro-Israel movement, getting American conservatives to love Israel as much as he did. This is what she wrote just 2 months ago, and it was very common. She deleted this image, I believe. This was after Turning Point hosted both a debate with Dave Smith on Israel, who's very critical of Israel, and Tucker Carlson's speech, who talked about Epstein being tied to the Mossad. She said, quote, "I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again. After this weekend, I'd say he has revealed himself as a political opportunist. And I have had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics these last 10 years. Lately, Charlie has decided to behave like a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. Turning Point was only able to thrive thanks to the generosity of President Trump. On the 1-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on Trump's life, Charlie hosted Dave Smith at Talking Points conference, where Dave Smith was able to speak to a bunch of conservative youth at an organization that claims to be pro-Trump. 3 weeks ago, Dave Smith called for President Trump to be impeached and removed from office over his decisions to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities. He also called for that impeachment because he perceived Donald Trump as covering up the Epstein files. Remember those? She goes on, Charlie played both sides of the Iran issue on his show, as we all saw, because he wants to play both sides of the aisle. The honorable thing to do is to have a position and actually defend it to the death instead of flip-flopping. Smith said that all MAGA should, quote, turn on Trump and abandon him. He said this 3 weeks ago. See the clip below. Turning Point is definitely not pro-Trump. If they were, they certainly aren't anymore. Can you imagine the audacity of these people attacking Charlie Kirk publicly and privately, threatening him, putting immense amounts of pressure on him for even just hosting debates on Israel, even though young conservatives, polls show, are wildly split on that topic, if not moving away from Israel. And yet each of them immediately, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and the emotions it produced, like just little weasels, decided, oh, you know what, we need to forget about all those criticisms of Charlie Kirk from a month ago, delete them. We need to now pretend that Charlie Kirk was the greatest friend that Israel has ever had. So that people wanting to emulate Charlie Kirk, people wanting to create movements in the wake of Charlie Kirk have to understand that his devotion to Israel was central to his political movement and cause. It was America and Christianity that were central to Charlie Kirk's movement and cause, and he did have a history of supporting Israel, and lately, over the past 6 months, starting with his vehement speaking out against what he called the war machine and the neocons trying to get the U.S. to bomb Iran for Israel, followed by his recent platforming of people. And Charlie Kirk was very kind to some of the most vocal Israel critics, including Dave Smith, including Tucker Carlson, including Candace Owens, including myself. I haven't talked much about my interactions with Charlie Kirk. I haven't wanted to center myself in those. I'm not going to pretend he was a close friend, but he was extremely supportive of my work, publicly so. In fact, at some of the hardest times possible. And obviously, I've been known for a long time as a vehement critic of Israel, to put that mildly. He was very open to the need to have that debate and was facilitating that debate more and more at the most important venues and was under threat for it and suffering for it. And I don't mean at all that that's what led to his death, but the exploitation of Charlie Kirk's death, especially by Netanyahu, immediately seized on it, and Israel supporters in general, but now the attempt to try and use Charlie Kirk's funeral to get rid of one of their most feared adversaries, Tucker Carlson, even though he was close friends with Charlie Kirk, even though Charlie Kirk considered him a crucial part of the conservative movement, platformed him. Tucker Carlson will be speaking at the Talking Points tour, was on Charlie Kirk's show. You have to realize what's going on here. Mourn Charlie Kirk. It's a horrific thing that we all witness. Feel free to criticize his record, but be very aware of how deceitful these people are in trying to salvage what they see is an unraveling effort, which is to keep Americans, conservative and liberal, left and right, enthralled to the state of Israel that they love by rewriting history of Charlie Kirk, using it to expel people who question Israel. And hopefully we'll have on Tucker tomorrow night to talk about a bunch of things, not just this. I don't think he has to defend himself at all on this. I want to talk to Tucker about many things I wanted to beforehand. But if we have him on tomorrow night, which we hope we will, we'll certainly, at least in passing, talk about what his point was there, which I think was self-evident, and the reaction to it. You know those nights when you just don't sleep? I think we all have those, and the next day you're kind of dragging and exhausted, and everything just feels harder. That's where CBD from CB Distillery can make a real difference. But it's not just sleep. CB Distillery has solutions that work with your body to help with stress and pain after exercise and even mood and focus. And it's all made with the highest quality, clean ingredients, no fillers or narcotics, just premium CBD. Imagine waking up rested or enjoying your day without those nagging aches and pains, without having to take a bunch of pills. That's the real win of CB Distillery solutions. That's why over 2 million people trust CB Distillery. I've talked about the use of CB Distillery before. I used it, in fact, on this trip. When you get adjusted to time zones, it really helps ease you into sleep without having to take sleeping pills. I've used it for pain after exercise. You can use it for stress. A lot of friends do. So if you're ready for better sleep, less stress, and feeling good in your own skin, try CBD from CB Distillery. And right now you can save 25% off your entire purchase. Visit CB Distillery and use the promo code Glenn. That's cbdistillery.com. Promo code Glenn, cbdistillery.com. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.